best way to preface this is saying that, like, over a decade of this work, being a men's coach, I've worked with tons and tons of guys, thousands of people have gone through my programs. I've coached like hundreds of guys individually, like all this other kind of stuff. And just like, I've got a pretty big sample size now of like what guys struggle with, what works, what doesn't, etc. And I found that, like, far and away, one of the biggest reasons, the biggest like culprits for a man being held back in his life is basically a lack of dignity. And dignity, it's a super simple concept on the surface. It's really just a claim that you have unconditional value and worth. So like, no matter whether your status goes up or down, whether you get more fit, less fit, more successful, less successful, more money, less money, people like you, people don't, regardless of all those status fluctuations, at your core, you have a fundamental sense of worth. Why is this such a big deal? That's really what I want to get into here today. I want to make it super crystal clear to you guys, because it's just tricky to trying to figure out how to sink your teeth into this concept. And the reason like guys tend to get this when they go through one of my programs is because I'm showing them exactly how to apply it to their life and to their pain points. And then when they start doing it, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that feels so much better. Oh, I'm making all this progress. Oh, I'm filled with all this motivation. Then you're going to be able to, I think, to hook into it. You're going to start seeing the value, and you're going to want to go deeper into this because really, this dignity concept is huge. So one of the first big signs that you've got a dignity issue is that you consistently abandon your own goals. All right. So this is something that guys struggle with constantly. They set a goal, they work toward it a little bit, and then they fall off. Right. That's kind of like the whole challenge that the self-improvement industry is built around, is so that you can stop doing that. And I guess some people, they can't even do that. They can't even get themselves started and then fail. They just can't even start. At the heart of this, I would say, is this lack of dignity, meaning basically you don't think you're worth the effort. That's the bottom line, is that if you can't get started and you can't sustain, is that somewhere along that line, you stopped thinking you were worth the sacrifice to making it happen. And this is a major problem because our limbic brain, it's like this big calculator, right? In a lot of ways, it's kind of a primitive calculator, but pretty much what it does is it's constantly calculating whether something's going to be worth the effort or not, because we only have a finite amount of energy as humans. And if we spend that energy poorly, well, we could die, especially, our hunter-gatherer ancestors. If they invested their energy poorly, they would probably die, almost certainly would. And so we're very energy conscious. And if you want to have a perpetual reason to continue to use your energy for your own benefit, you got to think you're worth it. And it can't be tied to any sort of like circumstantial things. It can't be tied to whether, people around you like you. It can't be tied to whether, you're currently getting success or not. Because at the end of the day, if you want this consistent progress, you have to be unconditionally worth the effort. And that's what dignity is. It's basically saying, yeah, I'm worth it. Okay. So if you struggle with this, then you got to ask yourself, it's like, at what point do you disconnect from your sense of worth? Right. And a lot of times this happens unconsciously. A lot of times there's agitating factors. You're tired, you're stressed, there's something that's upsetting you. But even a lot of those things, as we'll get into it, are also tied into dignity issues themselves. But if you get this core idea that you're constantly, perpetually, perfectly worth showing yourself love and sacrificing for, then you're going to be able to make smooth progress. And this is one of the ones that I think really just kills guys. And it's a lack of confidence or fear, or maybe just even anxiety in certain kinds of social situations. And the reason why this hurts guys so much is because we're profoundly social creatures, us humans, right? Some people, I guess, are wired more to be loners, but even most of those types, unless you're like that extreme outlier, like monk who wants to go live in the woods kind of thing, every single person is going to benefit from some kind of social interaction because you're built for it. We're social creatures down to the wiring of our brain. And when you have these blocks to interacting socially, whether it's, you don't feel comfortable going out and meeting new people, you feel like you need to impress people, you feel like people are judging you, you feel like, you can't approach a woman that you're interested in, all this kind of stuff, it really kind of halts your life development. It can halt your career development too. I mean, networking is obviously super powerful in the career sense, but also, performance-based stuff. Like how do you feel in the office? How do you feel in that hierarchy? How are you talking to people who are in positions above you? All of these kinds of things, if you have resistance and fear around them, then you're going to really slow yourself down. And ultimately, this again, it comes down to a dignity thing, because what happens is when you don't have a strong sense of personal dignity, you're going to be in a position where you need to get something from the people around you, because what you're looking for then is you're looking for them to validate you. You need to get their affirmation, or else you're not going to feel good enough because you think that their opinion defines you, right? And so this is where people will start sometimes coping by wearing masks. They won't be their authentic self. They'll try to behave like how the cool kids want them to behave, or they'll put on some kind of strong front to try and trick people into thinking that they're something other than they are, or whatever it is. And this leads to faulty behavior, inauthentic behavior. And even if people get to like you like that, they're not liking the real you. They're liking some kind of fabricated version of you. And in the romantic scene, this is even more intense, because you're going to be trying to get this woman to sexually affirm you. And if you don't get that, well, then it's it hits guys so deep, right? And so that's why there's so much anxiety around it. I know a lot of guys who are hyper confident, social, outgoing, etc. But when it comes time for them to actually interact with a woman, it's they're so scared, they're so nervous, they can't do it, because they're really worried about that rejection, right? Because they think if they don't get affirmed, then they're just not good enough, and it hits them deep. Now, if you have a sense of dignity, then this whole kind of grasping at validation thing gets reversed, because from the dignified perspective, your whole role is to just acknowledge, hey, I'm good. I'm fundamentally good. And my whole goal in a social situation is just to share that goodness in whatever is a contextually beneficial way. So, for example, if you're going on a date with a girl, you don't need to get her to like you. You just need to share the good parts of yourself that you have with her. You're giving something. You're coming from a place of gift. You're sharing your attention, your sense of humor, your thoughts, your time, your energy, sometimes even your money. You're taking her out on a date, these kinds of things. You're there to share. And this can be applied to every single sort of social dynamic. So, for example, if you're going for a job interview, I was a computer science major in college, and I wasn't a particularly good one because I didn't study very well, because I had, I was pretty messed up in college. But, I got every job I interviewed for, even if I wasn't quite qualified, because I went into it with a sense of dignity. Instead of me getting interviewed, I viewed it as, hey, we're having a conversation here. I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me, because I know I have value. I've got people skills. I've got the ability to work. I've got the ability to focus. And so it was I was here sharing the good of myself, and I was letting them share what they could offer me. And coming at that level of power parity, in a sense, it just makes you seem more valuable. And that holds true with dating. It holds through with the social situation. And it's you want dignity because people can feel it. They can feel it when you've got a strong sense of yourself. So socially, obviously, it's a big deal. Now, it also has a big impact on just the way you feel sort of psychologically, setting your psychological baseline. Because I know many people, men and women, really struggle with this kind of background feeling of I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough, right? And this can just physiologically, this is a stress scenario. It's there's a little alarm bell that's constantly going off in your mind, a little smoke detector that's constantly chirping at you, right? And sometimes it goes into a full-blown fire alarm, but it's just not comfortable. It keeps you from ever really stepping into a real state of peace, because what you're doing is you're judging your worth based upon your status, where I'm at in the world, and you feel like you don't measure up because there's always more status to be gained. There's always someone with more status than you. And it creates this baseline of anxiety, unease, and just a lack of peace. But if you were able to just sink down into, hey, I'm actually good, then that whole little chirping, that alarm bell, it goes off, it stops, right? And then you can just calmly start showing up in the way that you want in life. And this has a big impact on your ability to avoid things like escapism, like porn, gaming, scrolling, all that kind of stuff. Because so much of that, we use that to basically drown out this alarm bell that's constantly going off in our head. So if you want more of that kind of piece and you want it to be easier for you to change your habits and that sort of thing, then you got to embrace your worth.